Chapter 3 Verisimilitude. Virginia stopped at the place where the trail touched the sandy bottom of the arroyo. It was suddenly very quiet, no breeze, no sound, not even a bird. Behind her, the trail corkscrewed up to the arroyo top, but from her present position it was impossible to see any of her house or garden because she was too close to the base of the cliff. Ahead, the trail entered the chaparral growth and disappeared in the density of the foliage. Across the arroyo was the landscaped ground of the golf course, and over the top of the chaparral was the little flag marking the proximity of the 6th green. She wasn't sure that she wanted to go any further. The place was full of mystery, but when she craned her neck to look up, the sky was blue and the sun was shining, and she could climb back up the trail in a minute or two any time she wished. So what was there scary about this place? Nothing. It was only that it was strange. That was all. A bird chirped and flew over the chaparral. Then another. Virginia looked around and took a couple of steps toward the chaparral. The trail was plain to see. Trails were meant to be walked on. Why not follow it? After all, she had come this far. She walked into the mottled chiaroscuro of the sun and shade within the scrub oaks. The trail curved almost at once, and unless you knew the lay of the land from having seen it from above, you wouldn't know just where you were. The trail went on, and she followed it, instinctively walking on her tiptoes, even though the sand would have made no noise had she run in it, and a few steps brought her to the slight clearing, caused by the widening of the gully, where stood the ramshackle home of Gosh. She stood looking at it for a full minute, ready to dash back the way she had come. Again there was no sound. Nobody was home. She hummed to herself, without considering the tune, singing the words under her breath. It was not a jazz tune, or a swing number, many of which she had learned from the radio, but was a monotonous and somewhat lugubrious melody, which she had often heard Celia sing over and over when she was busy in the kitchen. The spirit of emotional rejoicing implied in the lyrics was belied by the parrot repetition of the simple melody. Going to Jerusalem just like John. Going to Jerusalem just like John. Going to Jerusalem just like John. Gonna see the Lord today. Virginia sang it, concentrating on her surroundings as she walked, slowly passing the uninviting shack which a quick glance disclosed, lined with old newspapers. She looked back, and then ahead. The trail went on into denser chaparral. She followed it. At once, the little clearing and the shack were lost to view. She sang, "Going to Jerusalem," in rhythm to her stride, but she stopped both the stride and the song abruptly when she saw a human figure ahead in the brush. For an instant she was frightened. Her impulse was to run, but in spite of it she simply stood, wondering if she should do something, anything. The old man, the very same old man, was peering at her. Her pink dress gave her away. He seemed to know her. "Hello there," he said. You playing hide and seek." It sounded reassuring, but she was incapable of a reply. "Or maybe you come to see me?" he asked. "No," said Virginia, taking a deep breath. "Oh no, I'm just looking round." "That's right. Look around and see the world," he said. "See the world and learn its ways." He moved away from her, and she saw that there was another shack nearby, and that the undergrowth had been cleared away from it. The old man sat down on a rickety chair, with a broken back in front of the house. "You can come a little closer," he said. "It's all right here." "I know," said Virginia, but she hadn't the least idea what she meant. "You live up above." "Yes," she said, moving forward a step in order to see beyond the screen of bushes. "Now I reckon I owe you 5 cents. "Oh no," said Virginia, "I didn't come for the nickel." "You live in the white house with the green hedge around it." "Yes, that's where I live." "Well, well, think of that. And I live right here in this house." "Where's his house?" "Whose house?" "The rat's." "Oh," Ben laughed, "his house is inside of my house." "Is it?" "Yes, indeedy." There was a moment of silence. Then Virginia said, "I was sorry when they threw you off the streetcar." "Oh," said Ben, deprecatingly, "weren't nothin'. Nothin' at all." "Where is it now?" "The streetcar?" "No, the rat." "Oh, why, he's here." "Where?" "Inside." "Your shirt?" "No, inside the house." "Oh." Virginia paused. She looked at the old man. He was smiling. He looked nice. There was no reason to be afraid of him. "Can I see it? I mean, may I see it?" "You go to school, don't you?" "Yes." "What's its name?" "Oh, he ain't got any regular name." "Well, you call him something, don't you?" "No," said Ben, "hardly ever. No name at all. Just Rat," said Ben. "Rat," said Virginia. "Has he got a friend named Mole?" "I have a book, and there's a rat in it, and he has a friend named Mole." "I expect he might know a mole or two," said Ben. "He never said." "You didn't say if I could see him or not." "Oh, yes indeedy," said Ben. "It ain't every day we have visitors. He's inside, there." The shack was gloomy inside, and Virginia, standing 6 feet away, could discern nothing of the interior. "You want me to bring him out?" asked Ben. "Yes, you bring him out." Ben got up and went inside the shack. Virginia could hear a couple of metallic clicks, and Ben's voice, speaking softly. In a moment he came out again, his hands at his sides, but no rat. "Where is it?" asked Virginia. "He thinks we're going someplace," said Ben. "He's in here now." He indicated his shirt. Ben sat down on the rickety chair and opened his shirt front. Virginia had a glimpse of the brown body of the rat, and then Ben fumbled with his hand inside the shirt and brought the animal out, holding it by the back of the neck. He put it in his lap, and it squatted there, darting its head about from time to time, and once in a while hopping about on his thighs, its legs moving with such quick reflexes that it was impossible to follow the movement. It had a tapering tail fully as long as its body, and when it was at rest, the tail curved around on Ben's thigh until its tip lay beside the 4 feet. Virginia was delighted. "It's lovely," she said. "Oh, it's lovely. Most people don't like rats, but that's because they don't understand 'em," Ben explained. "Would he care if I touched him?" "Not if you do it slow," said Ben. Virginia put 2 fingers on the rat's back and lightly stroked it. "Oh, it feels funny. It's not soft. It's more like bristles." "What's your name?" asked Ben. "Virginia Stewart." "What does he like to eat?" "Rats eat anything." "Could I bring him some cheese sometime?" "Yes, he likes cheese." "Hello, rat." "Hello, rat. What's your name, little rat?" "Look at his funny whiskers." "And look at his ears." "He likes people when he gets to know 'em," said Ben. "I can see he'd take quite a shine to you." "Can he do any tricks? Like a dog, you mean?" "Yes." "No, rats are different." "He's smart, though. I think he's wonderful," exclaimed Virginia. "Of course, he can travel around in my shirt. That's a trick. Hello, little rat. I'm going to bring you some cheese to eat." Virginia squatted down in front of Ben's knees, and for a quarter of an hour they talked of rats and their habits, and of the idiosyncrasies of this rat in particular. "They're just like humans," said Ben. "They are?" "Yes, indeedy. He gets touchy and excited. If things don't work out just like he figures they ought to, why, he has a nervous breakdown." "He does?" "Yep. Won't eat. Gets the blues. Acts just like a human." "Do you give him aspirin?" "No, I just try to think what he's thinkin', and then when I see what's botherin' him, I fix it for him. Like the time he got honey sick. He like to lost his mind over that." "Honey sick?" "Oh, he was in a bad way over that. You see, I had a bottle with some honey in it, and he licked the sticky part off the outside. Well, he loved it, and he licked it clean, and that just about drove him loco because he could see the honey inside the bottle, but lick as he couldn't taste it no more." "Oh, the poor little rat," said Virginia. "He licked and couldn't taste nothin', even though he could see all the nice honey through the glass. Well, he run around and round the bottle in a circle, cryin' like a baby. He'd sit and look at it, and then rush up and try lickin' it again. And when he could see it, but couldn't taste it, he'd run again. Oh, he was gettin' desperate." "What did you do?" "Well, that was before I was on to the ways of rats, so I didn't do nothin'. I went off and left him while I attended to some business, and an hour later I come back and he had went crazy." "Crazy?" "Yes, indeedy. He was layin' lookin' at that bottle and pantin' with his tongue hangin' out, and he was kind of in a stupor. I give his tail a tiny little pinch, and he never knew it. I picked him up, and he was like a dish rag. Didn't know nothin', didn't feel nothin', just a complete nervous wreck he was." "Oh, what a pity," said Virginia. "I felt right sorry for him, and I knowed how he was sufferin', 'cause I've seen humans do the same thing when they lose all their money, or can't get their own way about something. That honey to him was life and death. Yes, indeedy. If he'd been a human, he might have shot himself. Daddy knew a man who shot himself in the Depression." "That so? What for?" I forgot. I think Daddy said he was caught in the crash. Well, there you are. That human seen all the honey and couldn't get it, so he couldn't stand it. This here rat was the same way. You wouldn't know it to look at him now. He's a well rat now. How did he get over it? Well, I seen what was the matter. I took the bottle and smeared a little honey on the outside, like it was before, and set it down in front of him. And that cured him? No, indeedy. He was too far gone for that. He just lay there limp, with the honey in front of his nose. He was so sick, he couldn't enjoy it. Oh, he was out of his head for fair. Poor little ratty-rat-rat. Well, I caught on to a secret then, and I've always handled him by it ever since. What was it? I let him think he figures a problem out for himself. That gives him confidence, and he gets well right away. What did you do? Well, he was layin' there starin', glassy-eyed, at nothin'. I put a couple of drops of honey on his tail. You see how long his tail is? Yes? Well, I pulled it around and stuck the end of it in his mouth, and there he was tastin' the one thing he had went crazy over when he couldn't get it. Then I left the bottle set where it was, but I took the cork out. It wasn't 1 minute before he figured out he could put his tail down in the bottle and bring it out drippin' honey. He'd lick the tail clean and do it again. Virginia clapped her hands. "Smart little rat," she exclaimed. That's what he figured, and that made him happy right away. After I figured he'd ate enough, I hid the bottle where he couldn't find it. That didn't bother him none at all. Next day I put the bottle back, and he like to had a nervous breakdown all over again, until I took the cork out for him. Then he put his tail in and got the honey. So that's how I come to learn that rats is smart, but like humans, they ain't smart enough. They go just so far, and then they crack. It's a good education to have a rat. I'll bring him a bottle of honey, shall I? Or cheese. He's a great cheese-eater. I'll bring him a lot of things, exclaimed Virginia. Isn't it nice that I came down here? Yes, indeedy. It's always nice to make new friends. He ought to have a name besides plain Rat, don't you think so? Maybe. I'll see if I can find a good rat name, shall I? Yes, indeedy. A rustling of the bushes attracted their attention, and Tex came into view on the trail over which Virginia had come. She looked at him in silence. "Hello, Ben," said Tex, focusing his eyes on Virginia. "Hello," said Ben. Tex walked on, looking back until he disappeared from view. "Who was that?" asked Virginia. "Tex." "Who is Tex?" "Just Tex. He lives up that way a little piece. Maybe I ought to go home now." "Maybe you better," said Ben. "Maybe your mother is looking for you." Virginia stood up. "Goodbye, Rat-Rat. See you later." And to Ben, she said, "I'll come back tomorrow." "No, tomorrow's Sunday, and we'll go for a drive. But I'll come back on Monday after school." "All right," said Ben. "Goodbye." "Goodbye," said Ben. Virginia ran along the trail. When she was partly screened by the chaparral, She called gaily, "I'll bring some cheese," and she heard Ben's "all right" as she went on. When she came upon Gosh's shack, she slowed to a walk, and she was surprised to see a strange creature, hardly a man, standing beside the shack. Gosh was amazed. Suddenly, out of the bushes had come a little girl, dressed immaculately in pink and white, and he couldn't believe his eyes. He watched her follow the trail until she was out of sight. "Well, for gosh sakes," he said, and he scratched his head. Virginia came out of the chaparral and began the climb to the arroyo top. It had been a wonderful adventure. It was a perfectly fascinating place. There was nothing scary about it after all. That old man was an awfully nice old man, and his pet rat was delightful. She'd be sure to see them again, Monday after school, and that last one. He didn't look like a man at all, but a gnome or an elf or one of those things. What an odd, interesting place it was down there. She was leaping up the trail so fast that she was out of breath. When she reached the top, she turned and looked below. 6 stories down was the chaparral. Until you knew it, there was no way to tell that there were shacks in the chaparral, and that men lived down there. Well, yes, by looking very, very closely, you could make out a piece of a shack, but that wasn't where the rat lived. That was the shack where the gnome lived. Why, he couldn't have been much taller than she was. He looked something like Dopey in Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. But the old man was really a very nice old man. She walked along the arroyo edge and scrambled over the hedge into her own garden and walked toward the house. A very nice old man indeed. Up here, life was going on in its usual way. Celia was in the kitchen. Mother was somewhere in the house. Daddy would be home soon. He might even be home now. Virginia walked slowly through the garden. All that down below, all that queer, strange way those queer, strange men lived, was something Mother and Daddy didn't know about. What's on the arroyo bottom? Oh, just earth and dirt and weeds, I suppose, Daddy had said. Sand and underbrush, Mother had said. Nothing, Celia had said. None of them really knew anything about it. But now she knew, and somehow or other it meant a great deal more than just seeing the pet rat. That was the important part of it, that rat. But what a strange thing it all was. Rat, old man, gnome. What a curious, unexpected feeling it left in you. It would be wonderful to rush into the house and tell Mother all about how rats had nervous breakdowns. It would be wonderful to pour all this new experience out and to ask questions about it. She would have done it, without doubt, a month ago, even a week ago. But now she walked soberly into the kitchen. Somehow she knew that she mustn't speak of it to Mother or Daddy, or even to Celia, or James, or Adashi. None of them would feel it. None of them would understand it. Probably none of them would even like it. It was another kind of world, that place down there, and it had nothing to do with this one up here. She would keep it a secret, not because it was bad or evil or anything like that, but because she was sure that if she talked to Mother about it, Mother might tell her that she mustn't go down there again, and she had to go down there again because she had promised to bring the rat some cheese Monday. Later she might tell Mother, but not now. It would be her secret for a while. She walked into the house, whistling tunelessly, and went upstairs to her room. From her bookcase she took a copy of The Wind in the Willows, and opened it to the colored illustrations of Rat and Mole. He really should have a name besides plain Rat. She might be able to think of one, and if the old man liked it, he could use it. It could be called Black Eyes or Sharp Eyes. No, they weren't so good. It had a long tail, but that didn't seem to suggest much. It had sharp whiskers. How would that be for a name? Whiskers. She said aloud, Whiskers. Maybe. She put the book away. At dinner, nothing was said about the rat, arroyo, old men, or anything pertinent thereto. Mother asked if she had been to see Claire Ensley, and she was impelled to say yes, but faltered in time and said no, I didn't go. It would have been so easy to say yes. Then Daddy wanted to know what she had been doing all afternoon. Now if she had only said yes, played in the garden and in the lot, at least that was true as far as it went, and it wasn't going any further because she turned the conversation by saying, Can I go to the movies tonight? Can I? May I, said Mother, not can. May I, said Virginia. I suppose it could be arranged, said Daddy seriously. We can carry it to the Supreme Court and win a close decision, provided the court isn't packed before we get it on the calendar. It was always supposed to be funny when Daddy talked like that. It didn't really mean anything. Mother laughed politely, and Virginia said, Uh-huh. She wished she knew why it was funny. What's packing a court? She asked. Like sardines. Absolutely, said Daddy. You fish around until you find a judge who swims in the channel you want him to swim in. Then you haul him in and put him in your basket. When you get enough fish, you pack them all together, and you call it a court. He laughed again. I'll tell Ralph Harmon Virginia said that. It'll tickle him. Virginia concluded that she had said something especially witty. Why don't we invite the Harmons to go with us to Monterey? Said Mother. Wouldn't that be tactful? Decidedly, said Daddy. I can endure her while you play golf with him, said Mother, and perhaps he won't cough his cigar cough quite as much as usual. Optimist, said Daddy. At any rate, it would be a good chance to have a talk with him. And it would be a nice thing for us to do, Mother said. We really owe them something. Worth a trial, said Daddy. You could even let him win by a few strokes, Mother said. No, that's asking too much, said Daddy. Every man has his price, but mine is more than blowing birdies for a bank president. Now, what were they talking about? Blowing birdies for a bank president. Did that make sense? If it's not like sardines, asked Virginia, what's it like? Packing a court, my sweet, is putting judges on the bench who are going to think just what you want them to think, explained Daddy. And when that happens in the Supreme Court of the United States, things have come to a pretty pass. Why, if it weren't for the sane decisions of the Supreme Court, there's no telling where we'd be today. Believe me, we've all got to go to bat. In 1940, or It's just too bad." It was all very confusing. Daddy meant something, no doubt, but the words conveyed little. Mother and Daddy went on talking about business and government and Ralph Harmon and something called the GOP, but Virginia concentrated on the slice of melon that Celia served for dessert. The important thing was that she could go to the movies if she wanted to. There was no opportunity to go down to the Arroyo Bottom for the next 2 days. On Sunday morning, Daddy played golf. In the afternoon, they all went for a drive to Santa Barbara and back, and the drive took most of the day. Sunday night, the McLeans came in for bridge, and Virginia went to bed. But Monday, after school, she was free, and there was no doubt about the order of things from 4 to 6 that afternoon. First, she coaxed, cajoled, and annoyed Celia into giving her a cheese sandwich, even though Celia had orders not to do such things. 6 minutes later, down in the chaparral, a rat was being fed the cheese, and Ben ate the bread himself. How would Whiskers be for a name? That's a good name. It's up to him, though, and he's kinda particular. Maybe we can think of something better. That's good enough, said Ben. Whisk for short. Whisk, said Virginia critically. It might do. I always name everything. Do you? Well, no, not always. When I was little, I used to play with dolls, and I had a lot of names for them. I reckon you did. And my knees. I bet you can't guess what their names are. Well, let's see, mused Ben. Virginia sat down on the sand beside Ben, who was sitting on the broken chair. She pulled her skirt above her kneecaps. Ben studied them. David and Goliath. No, guess again. Trade and Mark, said Ben. No, I reckon I give up. This one's Paul, and this one's Pauline. Well, I named my feet too. Can you guess what I call them? Well, they are right nice little feet, all dressed up in shoes and socks. You'll never guess them, I better tell you. This one's Crystal, and this one's Bristol. Crystal and Bristol. Well, them's awful good names for a pair of feet. I never could have guessed them. I ain't bright at names the way you are, but you've got a name yourself, haven't you? Oh, yes indeedy. What is it? Ben. Ben what? Oh, just Ben. Ben Smith? Ben Jones? Ben who's it? It don't make much difference no more. Ben who's it? Oh, you're fooling me. Your name's not who's it. Well, no, rightly it ain't. Haven't you got a last name at all? Well, I don't need one. No use having something you don't need, is there? Ben looked at the rat. It was sitting on his thigh, finishing the cheese, eating rapidly and paying no attention to anything but its food. Ben addressed it. Do you want a moniker, young fellow? A what? Asked Virginia. I asked him if he wanted a moniker. Oh, said Virginia. She considered for a moment. What's a moniker? A name. I never heard the word before. Moniker's a good word. Ben leaned forward, lowering his head close to the rat. Then he looked up and nodded briskly, and smiled at Virginia. Yes, he said, he'd like a moniker. He did. Yes, indeedy. He said something to you just then. Aha. Can he talk? No, not exactly talking, but I can make him out. Ask him something else. Well, let's see what we can ask him. Ben thought for a moment and gave Virginia a wink. Again he bent forward and whispered unintelligibly to the rat, but he couldn't seem to understand the rat's answer, for he had to listen closely and to ask what, and then listen again. Ah, he said in concurrence, that's right. What did he say? What did he say? She demanded. I asked him if he knowed your name. Did he? Did he know it? He said it begun with a V, and when I asked again, he kinda said, Virginia. Virginia squealed and clapped her hands. That's right, that's it. How did you know to make him say it? You told us last night. He remembered it. Why, Whiskers, what a smart little rat you are. Make him say something else. I can tell without asking now, said Ben. He's sayin', more cheese, more cheese. All gone, said Virginia, all gone, Whisk. She looked up and said, I don't like whisk. Let's try something else. Whisk, Whiskers, Wicky. I like Wicky. What do you think of that, Ben? It was the first time she had called him Ben. Neither of them reacted to it, though they both noticed it. Wicky is pretty good, said Ben. Your name is Wicky, said Virginia to the rat. It continued to sit on Ben's knee, twitching its whiskers and occasionally its tail. He likes it all right, even if he don't say nothin', said Ben. He's that way. He ought to be baptized to make it right. Are you baptized, Ben? Oh, yes, indeedy. Can you remember what it was like? No, I can't hardly recall it now. Can't you remember anything about it? No, I reckon I can't. Well, try, Ben, try hard. 'Tain't no use. I bet you can't remember being baptized either, or was you? Yes, I was baptized. I didn't know it, but Mother told me about it later. Daddy said it's all a lot of nonsense, but they had it done just to please my grandmother. She died. Well, baptized, Wicky, shall we? Well, I don't know, said Ben doubtfully. He might not like it. I know they sprinkle water on you, but I don't know just what to say, do you? No, Wicky don't like water put on him. We can just pretend it's water, but I don't know what it is they say when they do it. Why can't you remember, Ben? Because it was 62 years ago. Hold on a minute. 60, 61, 62, maybe it was 63. Are you 63? Seems like that ought to be right. Wow! Virginia lay back on the sand, leaning on her elbows. She stared up at Ben with renewed interest. I'm 10. I thought you was about that. But I'm old for my age, my parents say. Yes, indeedy, said Ben. I'll be 11 in December. How old is Wicky? Don't rightly know, said Ben. He was just a little fellow when I found him, so I guess he's a couple of years old. Where'd you find him? Found him almost froze to death in a dump. Let's see, where was that place? Back east a ways. Oklahoma or Kansas or some place. Can't recollect what town I was in at the time. Tell me some more, Ben. Well, it was 'bout dusk, and I was pokin' around this here dump, and it was a right cold spell. Maybe it was Colorado. Now I ain't sure. But this here baby rat was layin' there, stiff-like, because tractors was plowin' up this dump because they was goin' to burn it. One of them tractors turned up a rat's nest, and this here baby rat got lost from his family somehow. I guess all his brothers and sisters scooted t'other way, or maybe something hit him and kinda knocked him out. But I seen him layin' there, still like, so I says, "Well, did you get cold?" And I picked him up thinkin' he was dead or maybe froze. So I put him inside my shirt, and blamed if he didn't thaw out or wake up or something, and there I was with him on my hands. Gee, that's wonderful. So I give him some victuals, and some what? Victuals. What? Something to eat. Oh. And he ate it, and I kept him all night. Well, next mornin' I started headin' south because of the cold snap, and I carried him along inside my shirt. He was young and got used to it, and that's how he got tame. I don't suppose he'd live like any ordinary rat now, because he's used to livin' the way he lives with me. Why, you like living with Ben, don't you, Wiki? We get along pretty well, said Ben. We don't hardly ever go hungry. Ben, if you run out of food, I can get some as easy as anything. That's right kind of you, said Ben. We always have a lot of things in the house. Celia does all the buying, and Mother says she buys enough for 10. Well, if you got something to spare some time, I'd be much obliged. I'll bring something every time I come, said Virginia. I can't bring much at a time because I don't want Mother, or that is, well, I'll bring some things. You wait and see. Don't go getting yourself in trouble with your parents. Oh, they'd be pleased, Ben. They'd like you if they just knew you. You never can tell about people, said Ben. You can't? No, never can. What can't you tell? How they'll fit. Together, you mean? Yes, indeedy. Now you and I got to be friends straight off, but you never can tell about other people, liking your friends. Oh, but Mother and Daddy are wonderful. You'd like them, and they'd like you. I reckon they love you too. Virginia was watching the rat. You got any brothers and sisters? Asked Ben. No, only child. Yes. Does he like vegetables? Some. And fruit. We eat almost anything, said Ben. I'll bring something tomorrow, but I don't know what it'll be. Hear that, said Ben to the rat. Virginia is going to bring you a present. He knows my name already, doesn't he? Yes, indeedy. See them whiskers twitch. That means good. Does it really? Uh-huh. When he moves 'em t'other way, that means 'tain't no good. What's it mean when he sniffs with his nose? That means, what in thunderation's that? It does. And when he scoots into my shirt front, that means, look out, something's a-comin'. Pretty soon I'll be able to understand him too, won't I? Yes, indeedy. I never thought I'd learn rat talk. You never had no pets? No. No dog or cat or nothin'? No. That's too bad. Have you had a lot of animals? Oh no, but I always seemed to keep something around me. I had 2 or 3 dogs. At once. No, different times. There was Rex and Rover, and there was Little Willie. And Little Willie, he was a terrier. They're awful smart, them terriers. Then once I had an awful smart cat. Mother hates cats. Well, you got to get on to 'em. What did you call the cat? Called it Squeak. Why? 'Cause it spoke. What else did you have? Lots of things from time to time. I reckon I can tame most anything that comes along. Wild things. Yes, wild things is the easiest. Anybody can do it if they want to. It's just being kind to things and putting yourself in their place so you can think what they're thinking. 'Tain't hard if you set your mind to it. Once I tamed a daddy longlegs. You did? Yes, indeedy. And he was the smartest bug you ever want to see. He ate spiders too. I wish we had one here. Maybe one will come walking in some day. Ben, let's get a lot of live things down here, shall we? I reckon they'll just naturally congregate if we let 'em. That'll be great fun, won't it? Yes, indeedy. I certainly like it down here, Ben. It's like camping. I went camping once in the high Sierras. Where did you camp before you camped here, Ben? Oh, I been all over, said Ben. Back east, down south, out west, up north, every place. I went east once, but I was only a little baby, and I don't remember it. I've been to the San Diego Zoo, though. Yes, indeedy, said Ben. Oh, Ben, do you know what? What? We can have a zoo right here. Maybe so. A real, live zoo, I mean. And you can be the manager. Where'll we keep the elephants? No, I don't mean a pretend zoo. I mean real live things. Wiki is the first. And you're the best, Wiki, so don't you care? Then we'll get wild spiders, and maybe you can find a daddy longlegs, and tame it, and let's see, what else is there? I seen a ladybug yesterday. We'll catch a ladybug and butterflies. And ants, said Ben. We got a lot of them. We'll make an ant house. There's lizards, said Ben. We'll get a lizard. And birds, said Ben. We can put out crumbs for the birds. Rabbits live in the brush too, suggested Ben. Maybe you can tame a rabbit, Ben. Could you, do you think? I can tame most anything at all. Oh, Ben, we'll start tomorrow, sure enough. And the gnome, he can be part of it. Gnome, said Ben. What's his name? Asked Virginia. Who? That funny little man who lives down that way. Oh, his name's Gosh. Gosh, that's his name. It's like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He can be dopey. Well, he is kinda dopey, agreed Ben. This is our house in the forest. I'll be Snow White. Gosh can be dopey, and you can be all the rest of the dwarfs. It won't be a zoo after all, Ben. It'll be Snow White and everything, and you'll have to go work in the mine, and the animals, mostly Wiki, will come and tell you that the bad queen is after me, and we need buzzards. Do you suppose you could tame a couple of buzzards? Well, I don't know, said Ben, bewildered by the rapidly changing scene. I ain't never had a carrion crow." "Can you whistle while you work?" "Oh yes, I can do that all right." "We can take turns. Part of the time I'll be the prince, and you can be the huntsman." "Oh, Ben, isn't this fun? Let's start now. I'll go over there and get lost in the forest." "Well," said Ben, "it's pretty late to start playing a game now. Maybe tomorrow." The sun was setting. Virginia let the Queen's forest dissolve into the chaparral. "I guess I do have to go home," she admitted, "but we'll play tomorrow." "Yes, indeedy," said Ben. "Wiki has to go into his house now." He got up and carried the rat into the shack. Virginia looked in, standing a few feet in front of the doorway. After a moment she walked to the entrance and peered in. Inside, the light was dim, and she could barely distinguish the cage with the treadmill. But it wasn't a shack. It was a fantastic little brown cottage, and it wasn't hidden in the chaparral of the arroyo bottom, but rather was ensconced in the sylvan depths of the royal forest. No old man lived herein, but a family of dwarfs, and in the surrounding glades wild life abounded. Through the green wood were secret trails, and high on a cliff overlooking the realm was the castle in which Snow White lived, and in that castle lived the wicked queen, called Mother. And no, that wasn't right. Mother couldn't be the wicked queen. How could that be worked now? Celia, she'd do. "Celia's the wicked queen," Virginia told Ben. "Is she?" said Ben, not understanding. "She's awfully wicked," said Virginia, "but tomorrow I'll escape and get lost in the forest." "That's right," said Ben. "It'll be grand, Ben. Wiki and I will clean your house and everything." "Think of that," said Ben, coming out of the shack. "I've got to go home now, but I'll make it all up while I lie in bed tonight. Will you help me while you're down here?" "Oh, yes, indeedy," said Ben. "It'll be such fun. Good night, Ben. You know how to go." "Oh, sure. If I get lost, the animals would show me." Virginia ran through the chaparral. "See you tomorrow," she called. "Good night," called Ben. He watched her run into the bushes, and for a minute he stood looking toward the place where she had disappeared. She must be a bright little girl, because some of the things she had said, though they were hard to understand, made sense. But wicked queens and dwarfs and buzzards and such, it must have meant something. Children are like animals. You got to put yourself in their place in order to figure out what they're thinking. Well, that was all right. He'd be glad to see her again. Nice little girl, Virginia. The old order had changed, and for Virginia, life took on a new dimension. There was the same streetcar, and the same conductor, and the same motorman, and the same rattle-clink-clink. But the conventional routine which had deposited her at home around 4 o'clock every afternoon became significant toward a further end. And the efficiency of the routine became important, even vital. There were times, of course, when the routine was interrupted. Sometimes school activities forced her to remain after classes, but usually that could be avoided. Sometimes Mother met her with the Pontiac, and the streetcar ride was eliminated, though that event was rare. Sometimes she rode home with Claire Inslee and Claire's mother, and sometimes Claire Inslee rode home on the streetcar too. But the habitual latitude and variety of the hours between 4 and 6, that indiscriminate time when you had nothing much to do, was now seasoned with interest and excitement. You could think about it during the day, in that place where you were alone, and when the day came around toward 3 o'clock, the important thing was to get home and down to the Arroyo bottom as quickly as possible, for down there was a rich and fascinating world where a friend was waiting for your arrival, and where a tame rat was waiting to play and be fed. The thought of it made a day ordinarily drab with arithmetic and grammar. Case is that property of a noun or pronoun which indicates use in the sentence, and penmanship and history, delightfully and secretly endurable, fractions and integers, and the effects of the Stamp Act were things to be considered in their place, but beyond their world with its dry smell and powdered chalk dust, and the slippery glazed feel of a desk top, and Miss Roberts' everlasting expression, it doesn't make any material difference. But her real name was material difference. In that place where you were alone. Beyond all that lay the chaparral in the sunlight, and the trail, and Ben and Wicky, waiting, watching, expectant. And it was not only Wicky who was chief attraction. Ben himself was a strange and interesting man, totally unlike anybody she had ever met before. New and odd things were constantly cropping up about him. He knew so much. There was hardly any question he couldn't answer. In fact, there were none. And on top of that, he enjoyed having questions put to him. He'd always have some kind of answer. Where was the end of the world? There wasn't any, because the world was round, like an orange. And where was the end of an orange? That explained that, all right. Why do men have whiskers when ladies don't? Well, it seemed that ladies did have whiskers after all. And what a laugh that had been. But they were tiny, little soft whiskers, and didn't show. That explained that, all right. What did it mean when Daddy said a man was a good Republican? It meant he had some money in the bank, and he was afraid he might lose it. So that explained that. Just ask Mother and Daddy questions like those, and you wouldn't get the same answers at all. They really didn't know the answers the way Ben did. Or ask Celia. She didn't know anything. But Ben knew something about everything there was. And if it interested Virginia to elicit information from Ben, it also interested Ben to hear from her. Bits, now and then, of her environment. A world which Ben knew existed, but which he had never experienced. When, for example, Ben learned that Daddy was a vice president of a bank, he seemed to think that was something amazing. He explained, of course, that he had never, to the best of his knowledge, seen a vice president of a bank, and he wanted to know what one was like, what he said, what he did, what he ate. even what he looked like, and if he always carried $100 bills in all his pockets. Virginia's curtal answers only seemed to make him repeat the questions or ask others, just as his replies as to how trapdoor spiders learned to make trap doors, and if Wiki knew Spanish words as well as English words, and if it took a chicken to lay an egg to make another chicken, how was the first chicken made? His glib and often provocative answers only inspired further questions. Sometimes they played games: Snow White, Zoo, Exploration, Hospital, and original games involving Wiki. Ben wasn't very smart, but he was willing, and as he always said, "You can't learn an old dog new tricks." "Why can't you, Ben?" "'Cause he never forgets the old ones." It was on a Wednesday afternoon that Ben brought the remodeled bird cage out of the shack, and for the first time Virginia saw Wiki run on the treadmill within the cage. She was delighted. "Run, Wiki, run! Catch 'em," she shouted. They made a game of it, and the game was to see who could keep Wiki running while the other pretended to be a dog or a cat who was in hot pursuit. "Or a coyote," said Ben. "He's scared of them." "I'm a coyote now. Start running, Wiki." She made a noise in her throat, which was an original interpretation of how she thought a coyote might act. The rat ran on the wire frame of the wheel, making it whirl at great speed, while Virginia pretended pursuit. "Hurry up, Wiki. I'm catching you. Run, run." "There, he's in the arroyo now." "But the old coyote's right after him. Run, Wiki, run." "There, he's home now, and the old coyote couldn't catch him." "You're too smart, aren't you, Wiki?" Ben laughed, and Virginia laughed, and Heavy, attracted by all this commotion, came through the chaparral to see what the hell was going on. And it was on that same Wednesday afternoon that Celia missed a loaf of bread and a can of pineapple. She blamed herself for absent-mindedness, but on Thursday a can of peas and a can of corn disappeared, and she began to suspect either the bottled water man who had come that day, or the boy who delivered for the White Swan dry cleaners, and she concluded that whichever one of them did it, he was certainly a fast worker, because she couldn't remember turning her back on him at all. She said nothing to Miss Stewart about it, but she decided to be on her guard after this. Then there were days when Ben and Virginia didn't play any game at all, but just sat and talked foolishness or asked riddles. And one day, when the riddles ran out, Ben invented the berry game. It consisted of seeing who could outberry the other by naming kinds of berries in alternate turns. Ben started with strawberry, and Virginia countered with blackberry, and Ben said gooseberry, and Virginia put in blueberry, and in a short while they had gone down the list into more difficult items, as loganberry and chinaberry and hollyberry, with each striving to find the ultimate, until Virginia caught on elderberry, tried to palm off library, calling it library, but Ben would not allow it, and won the contest thereby. But whatever the mood and the humor might be, it was always interesting and fun and exciting. Sometimes they talked seriously, about animals and flowers and birds and stars. Then there was the time she had hurried down the trail with some link sausage, scooped, as Ben put it, from the refrigerator when Celia was in the dining room, and found Ben smiling and saying, "Got something to show you I bet you never seen before." "What, Ben? What is it?" "Surprise." "What kind? Shall I close my eyes?" "Nope." "Then where is it?" "Nearby." "What is it?" "Surprise." "Now you tell me, Ben, or I'll take this sausage straight home." "Ho," said Ben, "maybe I don't eat sausage." "Yes, you do. You said yesterday you did. I was only fooling. What's the surprise, Ben? Tell me now." "Well," said Ben, "look around." "I am looking. I don't see anything different." "You was warm when you looked over that way." Virginia moved in the direction indicated. "Getting warm," said Ben. She was close to the chaparral, a few yards from Ben's shack. "Warmer, warmer, hot." "Virginia's hot now." "Where? I don't see anything." "Stand still," said Ben. "Now look left a little and up." Virginia peered into the oak thicket. "Oh, Ben, what is it?" she asked, looking at a small, woven brown object, hooked bag-like between two branches, slightly beyond her reach. Ben came over beside her. "Cocoon," he said. Together they studied the object. "What's in it?" asked Virginia. "Life," said Ben. "An animal, a caterpillar." "Will it come out?" "Some day." "When?" "Can't say. Right now she's just a little worm-like thing in there that's asleep and don't know much, but some day she'll grow up and come out of the cocoon, and she won't be a caterpillar no more, but she'll be a butterfly, all colored pretty." "Oh, Ben, I wish we could see it happen." "Maybe we will, but we'll have to watch close because one day, before we know it, she'll be growed up, and she'll go flying off to see the world." "It'll happen in the daytime, won't it?" "Oh, yes, some bright day." "We can watch it every day, Ben. You can watch it, and when I'm here, I can watch it. I bet we see her fly away, Ben." "What do you bet?" "Shouldn't be surprised." The cocoon set the key for the afternoon's discussion. "We're getting a lot of live things down here," said Virginia. They went back to the entrance of the shack. Ben sat on the rickety chair, and she sat on the sand in front of him. "But you're the best, Wicky. There's no doubt about that, is there, Ben?" "Nope," said Ben. "Did that ladybug that flew away ever come back, Ben?" "Never did," said Ben. "Leastways, I never saw it again. Shall we go over to the 7th tee and look at our trapdoor spiders?" "I guess not today. Let's set here for a spell." "What other live things can we get, Ben?" "Well, there's plants. Don't forget the plant world is just as alive as the animal world." "Then life's everywhere, isn't it?" "Yes, indeedy." "What is life, Ben?" Ben hesitated. Virginia looked up at him expectantly. He rubbed his 5-day stubble of gray beard. He pursed his lips, and squinted his watery green eyes, and said, "Well, you know, don't you?" "Oh, yes, yes, indeedy." "Well, what is it?" Virginia repeated. She sat on the sand, half reclining on one elbow, brushing a few grains from her navy blue skirt, and examining her white middy blouse. When there was no answer, she looked up again, in mild surprise. Ben was frowning in a labor of thought. He inhaled a deep breath and said, "It's the opposite of being dead." "I know that, but I mean, what is it?" "Well, it's knowing things, and being able to tell other things from yourself." "Can Wiki do that?" "Sure he can." "Can a bug?" "Yes, indeedy." "You seen how a bug walks around and kinda feels things out? He's figuring, now this is a rock, and this here is sand, and over there's my house. That's because he's alive." Virginia gave it some thought. She sat up and locked her arms around her knees and shook her head in order to throw her braids back of her shoulders. "It's funny, isn't it? I never thought about it before." "'Tain't funny," some smart feller said once. "Life's a serious thing. Very few of us get out of it alive." "Oh, I don't think I'll ever die, Ben," said Virginia lightly. "I suppose you will, though. Old people always do." "I reckon," said Ben. "But what I want to know is, how did it start?" "Life? Yes, how did it begin?" "Well, in the beginning, first there was the Word." "What word?" "The Word. Any word, like pachyderm or carburetor. We had them in spelling today." "You can correct each other's papers," Miss Roberts said, "and those in the front row may correct their own. It doesn't make any material difference. She always says that. I got 96. You must be a good speller." "I am." "What was the first word you were talking about?" "The Word of God." "What did he say?" "He said, 'Let there be light.'" "Was it dark?" "Not after he said that about light." "Then what did he do?" "Then he made life." "Out of what?" "The firmament." "The what?" "Firmament." "What's that?" "That was all there was at the time." "He didn't have much to work with, but he kept at it until he got it the way he wanted it. By that time he was all wore out, so he called it Sunday and laid off." Virginia was having difficulty with the mental image. "But I don't see what life is yet, Ben. Was it like making something out of mud?" "Something like it." "Well, did God make everything that's alive here in the arroyo bottom? Wiki, and ants, and bugs, and you and me?" "Well, he got it started a long time ago, and it's been going on ever since." "What keeps it going?" "His plan." "Well, did he know what he was doing?" "Yes and no," said Ben. "Ben, I wish you'd tell me better. I can't make much sense out of it." "Well, look here. I'll think about it and figure it out, and in the meantime you ask your mother to explain it. I bet she can do it twice as good as I can." "All right, I'll ask her tonight." "I'd kind of like to know what she says," said Ben. "If you can remember what she says, you can tell me." "I'll tell you, Ben. Isn't that funny? You always tell me things, but now I'll tell you." "Yes, indeedy." Mother's answer that night, just before Virginia went to bed, was disappointing. It was almost 9 o'clock, and Mother came in to kiss her good night. and was promptly faced with the question, "Mother, how did life start?" "Oh, that's a long story," said Mother. "It's bedtime now. But I want to know what life is. Someday you will. When? When you're in your teens." It was all exasperating. "When you're in your teens" was the most unsatisfactory of answers. Time and again she had been stopped by these words. She was going to be allowed to carry a compact and a lipstick, but not until she was in her teens. Mother had agreed to cut her hair and wave it, but not until she was in her teens. Someday she could use perfume, but not until she was in her teens. And now a simple question that anybody ought to be able to answer was put off by the aggravating "wait until you're in your teens." Then Mother kissed her good night and turned out the light and went downstairs. Before making the trip to the Arroyo Bottom after school the next day, Virginia went into the house through the kitchen door and walked into the library. She knew what to do about the evasive question of what constituted life. Material difference, when questioned during recess, hadn't known any more about it than Ben and Mother. But at home in the library, on a stand, was Daddy's large, heavy dictionary. She had been taught how to use a dictionary in school, and to this unabridged court of last resort she now turned. It was an awkward, clumsy book, too heavy to be handled easily, but there was L and la and li and lie, and there it was, life. She bent over the big book and read, "Life, the state or fact of being alive." Then there was a lot more stuff, the way there always is in dictionaries, and she skimmed over the remaining definitions, finding nothing as clear as the first explanation, until the thing was dissipated into life belt and life blood and life boat, which was off the track altogether. It was another impasse. The state or fact of being alive. Just think, all the words there were in that dictionary, and it couldn't say anything better than that. There was something to this problem that she didn't understand, but whatever it was, she'd find it out. It was annoying, like an itch. She closed the dictionary, giving it a scornful glance, and walked through to the kitchen. Celia was nowhere to be seen. She opened the cool closet and took a can of soup and a jar of chipped beef and walked out of the house and down the trail. It had been almost 3 weeks since she and Ben had become friends. In that interval, she had visited the Arroyo an even dozen times. It was no longer an adventure, but an accepted procedure. Once or twice, Mother would inquire of her whereabouts, but it was impossible to tell Mother about Ben and Wiki, and the Arroyo now. It was too late. When she was in her teens, then she would tell her. Mother supposed that she played at school or played with Claire Inslee, and as Mother was usually out in the afternoons, it really didn't make a great deal of difference. Material difference. That was what it didn't make. No material difference, she said as she walked down the trail, adapting the words to the melody of "He's a Jolly Good Fellow." No material difference, no material difference, no material difference, for Ben gets a can of soup. Gosh watched her pass by on the trail through the chaparral, and he grinned his toothless grin, and she waved at him and marched on. Ben would be glad to have the soup and the meat, but next time she came she was going to bring him a real surprise. She had discovered that he shaved once a week, and that it was a painful event because he had an old and inferior razor, and he wished he had a better one. Next time she came she was going to bring Ben Daddy's little black box containing a beautiful yellow safety razor, and some blades, and a styptic pencil, and a shaving stick. Daddy would never miss it, because Mother had given him an electric razor last Christmas, and he never used the old one anymore. Well, hardly ever. Probably he'd forgotten all about it by this time, and Ben could just as well have it. Daddy didn't need it, and she had heard Ben say, "No use having something you don't need, is there?" And she had heard Daddy say, "You can always tell a gentleman by the condition of his razor." When you put the two together, it simply meant that Daddy's unneeded razor could help Ben be a gentleman. No material difference, no material difference, no material difference, for Ben gets a razor blade. But Ben didn't know anything about this yet, and she mustn't sing about it, or he'd catch on. She dropped the lyrics to a hum. Before she saw Ben, she heard a hammering, and as she came into the sandy clearing, she saw that he was at work making a door for his shack. "It's October," said Ben, when Virginia asked him what he wanted a door for, "and it gets chilly at night. If I figure on staying on here a while yet, I might as well fix this here place up comfortable like." "I didn't know you were a carpenter, Ben." "Oh, yes indeedy." "Were you a regular carpenter once?" "No, not exactly." "What business were you in, Ben?" "Well, it's hard to recollect 'em all. Once I was in the harness business. Once I was a fruit picker. Once I worked in an ice house. Once I sold mules." "A mule salesman?" "Uh-huh." "Then I been in the junk business, and the odds and ends business. Once I repaired gas stoves. Once I was in the salvage business. That's about the same as the junk business. Fancier name, that's all. We have a gas stove. If it ever gets out of order, you must come up and fix it." "Yes indeedy." "Once I was a night watchman." Ben stared up at the arroyo cliff, concentrating on his business recapitulation. "Once I fixed bicycles." "Once I was a farm hand." "Once I was in a slaughterhouse." "Once I was in a livery stable." "Once I sold patent medicine." "Tried to, that is. The patent medicine business ain't no good. I'd advise you to keep out of it." "All right, I will, Ben." "Once I sharpened knives and scissors and such." "Once I sold fancy buggy whips." "Tried to, that is. That's a business to keep out of too." "Buggy whip business." "Yes indeedy." "Once I repaired window glass and sold window cleaner and wallpaper." "Tried to, that is." You want to keep out of any business where you have to sell anything. Too hard to convince people. I like a business that comes to you. There a man can expand and study it and be his own boss, like the junk business. I was a right good junk man. Still am too. Kinda got my heart in it. What you got there? Soup and meat. Well now, that's right kind of you. Ben always said that. No matter what she brought, he always said, "Now that's right kind of you." Next time, when she brought the razor, he'd say the same words again. Wouldn't he be surprised, though? When are you going to shave again? Ben rubbed his beard. Oh, long, 'bout middle of next week. That's right, Ben. Don't you shave until next week. Why? Because today's Thursday, and I won't be here again until Monday. We're going away on a trip over the weekend, and Mr. and Miss Harmon are going with us. I'll be here Monday, though, after school. That's nice, said Ben. Promise not to shave. I promise. Mother and Daddy don't like the Harmons, but they have to be nice to them. Where's Wiki? Inside. May I bring him out? Sure enough. I reckon he knows you as well as he knows me now. Virginia went into the dingy shack and opened the door of the cage. With a little coaxing, the rat came to her hand, and she carried it outside to Ben. Open that jar of meat, Ben, so I can give him some. He wants his dinner. Ben sat on his broken chair, and Virginia sat on a box, and together they fed the rat. She sat with her knees apart, so that her skirt formed a valley between her thighs, and Wiki sat in this valley, and nibbled chipped beef. He says it's good. I can tell by the way his whiskers twitch, said Virginia. See? That's just what he's sayin', agreed Ben, purloining a pinch of the beef from time to time. Oh, how's our cocoon? She asked, twisting on the box in order to look over her shoulder. Still there, said Ben. Nothin' come out yet. October's pretty late. Maybe nothin' will. I couldn't find out what life was, said Virginia. Nobody would tell me. No, there's something funny about it. We'll find out yet. Well, said Ben, I been thinkin' how to answer you, and I reckon you might ask your Sunday school teacher to tell you the story of the creation. Why, I don't go to Sunday school, Ben. You don't? No, some children have to, but I never did. Did you? Yes, indeedy. I went to Sunday school every day of my life. Oh, Ben, you did not. Yes, I did. No, every Sunday of your life. Well, that's what I meant, said Ben, mollified. Mother and Daddy don't believe in religion. They don't. Of course not. Here, Wiki, don't you bite my fingers. Give me some more meat, Ben. Ben was frowning. He handed her a pinch of chipped beef, saying, The Bible tells you all about how life begun. Didn't your parents ever teach you nothin' out of the Bible? No. Never? Why, no, Ben, never. Well, if I had a nice little girl like Virginia, I'd see to it she got some Bible learnin'. Oh, I know about the Bible. I've heard it read in school. Well, that's better, said Ben. Sometimes the teacher reads it out loud. Sometimes the principal reads it. I know about the Bible, honest I do. It sounds awful. Well, Ben hesitated. It sounds simply awful, Ben. Yes, but... Wait, Ben, let me be the Bible now. Here, you hold Wiki. She closed her knees and put her hands palms together, devoutly before her breast. Listen, Ben, The Bible sounds something like this. Listen now. She spoke in a doleful and dreary inflection. Jesus cameth unto Israel, and spoketh unto Cain and Abel, and he saith unto them, Yea, by the still waters, she is finer than fine gold. So be ye something or other. Isn't that just what it sounds like, Ben? Why does it have to sound that way for, Ben? I don't know, admitted Ben, but it always does sound something like that. And you ought to see the funny face the supervisor makes when he reads it. Something like this. She drew her lower jaw and the corners of her mouth down in a half-witted grimace and stared up at the sky. Claire Ensley and I always get the giggles when he reads it. Blah blah of the blah blah he goes, blah blah. "'Tain't no laughin' matter, the Bible," said Ben seriously. "Don't your parents let you go to no church?" "No, we never go to church. I know where there is one, though." "Where?" "Right up there. You go across Palm Drive 2 blocks, and you come to a little church. Daddy says it's hard up." "Hard up, that's what he says." "I ain't been in a church for 20 years, said Ben, "but it's right to go just the same." "Daddy makes fun of that church up on Palm Drive." "He does?" "Yes. He says it's a detriment to the neighborhood." "A what?" "Well, he means it's a nuisance." "Oh, because he doesn't like the music it makes. It goes yow yow, Ben." "Yow yow?" "Yes, it's got an organ, and every Sunday the organ plays the same things, over and over, and the people sing the same words, over and over. It sounds awful." "But church music is sacred," said Ben. "I never heard it called awful before." "Are you sure your daddy said that?" "He said the organ wheezes. When the wind is right, you can hear it all the way to our house. It's just the same every Sunday, Ben." She leaned forward on the box in her excitement. "Listen, Ben." She slipped off the box, and she knelt before him in the sand and assumed a pious expression. "This is the way it goes every Sunday." Ben listened. "Hail the Lord, yow yow yow, yow yow. Hail him again, yow yow yow, yow yow. Give him the works, yow 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 yow. Hail to gentle Jesus. Are you ready? Let's go." Ben shook his head skeptically. "I don't think you got it quite right." "Oh, yes, I have, Ben. That's just what it sounds like. I know it sounds like that, Ben. I know it. And that's not all, Ben." She continued to kneel before him. "Listen to this now, Ben, because after that it goes like this." She sang tunelessly in a mournful voice. "Hail to gentle Jesus. Oh, how we hail Jesus. When we hail him, he stays hailed. Yow, yow, yow." "Well," said Ben, "maybe it sounds like that to you, but I bet you got the words a little mixed up." "Oh, no, I haven't, Ben. You go up there next Sunday and listen. They do it every Sunday. Yow, yow, yow." "I can see you never been to church," said Ben. "You sound sacrilegious." "What's that mean?" asked Virginia, returning to a seated posture on a box and pulling her skirt down over her knees. "It means ungodlike. It means you don't know about God." Oh, yes, I do. I know about God, Ben. But your parents never taught you nothing about the Bible, did they? But I believe in God just the same. What's he look like? Asked Ben. Oh, he's, well, God. White whiskers? Asked Ben. Yes. Golden throne? Yes. Way up on a cloud? Yes. Sort of, up somewhere. Big fat belly? Yes, no. He's kind of big, though. He got light blue eyes and kind of a long stick and a big voice like this, Ben, speaking as basso as she could. I'm God. But he means well, and he's kind of a nice old man. Uh-huh, agreed Ben. I kind of figured you'd think he was like that. And he wears sandals, golden sandals. Why? Asked Ben. They keep him from catching athlete's foot. Nodded Ben. And a white robe. He always wears a white robe. And angels, said Ben. There's always a lot of angels hanging around him. They play harps, explained Virginia. He likes the sound of harps. Yes, indeedy, he'd rather hear a harp than the radio. That's because he doesn't know any better. Wait till he hears Charlie McCarthy and Uncle Boojum and the Green Hornet. He'll never go back to heaven after that. Then he'll take up the Lambeth Walk. What's that? It's a kind of dance or something. Doing the Lambeth Walk, Hoy. Oh, jazz, said Ben. No, swing it, said Virginia. Well, I don't know, said Ben. He's pretty old for them dances, like I am. When he gets too old to go on godding, he'll have to go to the old god's home, said Virginia. But maybe he don't like the idea of going to the old god's home, protested Ben. And if he don't like it, do you know what he'll do? No, what'll he do, Ben? He'll go on the road like me. Yes, sirree, that's just what he'll do. Virginia clapped her hands. Wouldn't it be funny if God came walking in here some day, Ben? Sure would, said Ben. He'd find a shack, and he'd live in it, and the first thing you know, he'd like it so much, he'd forget all about heaven and angels and harp. Wouldn't he, Ben? Uh-huh, said Ben. That's what you think. But s'pose I told you I had God all figured out a different way. S'pose I said God ain't an old man with white whiskers at all. He's not? No, he's not even got a white robe. He hasn't? No, that's just the way little boys and girls think about God. I reckon I thought that way once, too. But you see, God is every place all at once. How do you mean, Ben? Well, there's a God in these here scrub bushes. There is? Yes, indeedy. And there's a God in every tree, every place. All trees? All trees, all bushes, all rocks, and animals, and sand, and earth. And here's something else. Even in you and me. You mean whatever I touch, that's where God is. Something like that. How about Wiki? Him too, all animals. In Mother and Daddy, yep. In me, yep. What part of me? Where? How is it? I can't explain it very well. You kinda got to feel it. You got to feel God every place. Once you get the feel of it, you know it. When you come right down to it, there ain't anything anywhere but God. But look, Ben, that's my foot. Is it God too? Yep, now you're catching on. But it's my foot, not God's foot. Yes, indeedy, it's your foot right enough, but it's God's too, everything is. You can't get away from God, because there ain't nothing, nowhere, but God. How about bad things? God isn't in them, is he? How do you mean? Well, like black widow spiders. God couldn't be in them, could he? Ben laughed. That's a right good question, but let me tell you something. Hard as it is to believe, in every single black widow spider, God is there too. Why is he, Ben? Why doesn't he say, zip, and there aren't any more black widow spiders? No, he don't work that way. You see, if God is everything every place, that means God likes all things equal, because all things are part of God, even bad things. Yep, 'cause to him there ain't no bad or good, like we figure it out. He figures different. Then why doesn't God see that you get enough to eat, Ben? He does. It's like this. Well, hold on now. You want to hear more about this? Yes, 'cause it's getting late. Tell me some more, Ben. I'll go in 1 minute. Well, just so you can sort of catch on better. Look at it this here way. When your stomach wants to eat, your hands pick up something. Bread, maybe. Chocolate cake. Your hands pick up a piece of chocolate cake and puts it in your mouth, and your teeth chew it, and you swallow it, and your stomach gets filled up. Now, none of those things really know what they're doing. They don't? No. Your hand don't know nothing, does it? No. Or your teeth? No. Or your throat? No. But their God, which is you, and is all of 'em at once, that you knows what it is doing. Hand don't know, teeth don't know, throat don't know, stomach don't know, only you know what you're doing. God works the world something the same way. A little girl called Virginia was the hand that picked up the chocolate cake. Only God made it a jar of meat and a can of soup. That trail down the cliff was the throat. I'm the stomach. God made it work that way, just like you make it work when you eat a piece of chocolate cake. In that way, we are all part of God, and he knows what he's doing. That's a funny way to think about it, Ben. Makes sense if you let it. Does God ever make a mistake and forget to do it right? Nope, never. But suppose I didn't bring the meat. But you did. I know, Ben, but suppose I didn't. You couldn't help bringing it. Then God never makes a mistake. Never. If we think he's made a mistake, it's just because we're too little, and we can't see the whole thing, the way he sees it in his mind. Why, look here, suppose you was starving to death on a desert island, and the only thing to eat was something you don't like the taste of. Onions. All right, your mouth hates onions, and all of a sudden your mouth has to eat onions. Well, maybe your mouth gets mad and says, Virginia made a mistake putting those awful onions in me. But that's only because your mouth wasn't able to know all the facts. Your mouth blames you for feeding it onions, but it never understands that on that desert island you had to eat onions or die. Now we're just the same when we blame God for something that seems to us like a mistake on his part. If we knowed what he knowed, we'd shut up. Can you understand that? Yes, I can, Ben. So we can't never say anything about God making a mistake. He just don't. How about the time Mother was out, and I ate a whole pound of candy in one afternoon? Was you sick from it? Oh, awful sick, Ben. Well, then it wasn't no mistake on God's part. Why wasn't it? He was just fixin' it so you wouldn't eat a whole pound of candy again. You ain't, have you? No. Well, you see. Huh, said Virginia. You can't lick God, said Ben. There just ain't no way. But I know one thing. You better walk up that trail, 'cause it's beginnin' to get dark, and maybe you'll get a spankin' when you get home. Why, I've never been spanked, Ben, said Virginia testily. You ain't? Why, no. Mother says she doesn't believe in it. It's too old-fashioned. Well, well, said Ben, no religion, no spankin'. Virginia stood up, bending forward and examining her knees, and brushing sand from them. I'm being raised just as if I was grown up. They reason with me. I've heard of bringing up children like that, said Ben, but I don't know. It's scientific, said Virginia. I know where babies come from, do you? The stork, said Ben quickly. No, a sperm goes into an egg and makes a baby. Ben looked amazed. It grows in the womb, and after 9 months it gets born. Mother showed me. Well, said Ben, dumbfounded. All children should be told that, Mother says, just as soon as they want to know. Not everybody knows it, though. Claire Inslee didn't until I told her. Their attention was attracted by voices coming along the trail. In a moment, Heavy and Tex came into view. Heavy had a package, and Tex had his pocket stuffed. They stared at Ben and Virginia as they walked on north into the denser chaparral. Nobody spoke, and in a moment they were gone again. They been out getting their supper, Ben explained. I have to go have mine too, said Virginia. Good night, Ben. Good night, Wiki. See you Monday. Good night, said Ben. Remember your promise, Virginia called back. What promise? Don't shave. Oh, no indeedy, I won't, smiled Ben. An instant later, the navy blue skirt and the white blouse disappeared in the bushes, and Ben sat alone, fondling the rat and musing upon the strange children of the world today. Well, well, he said at last. When I was a kid, it used to be the stork. Now it's the sperm. He scratched his head. The sperm. Then he got up and went into his shack. There was a third of a jar of chipped beef left, and a can of soup to be added to his slowly growing larder. He took inventory. Beef, can of soup, can of corn, can of tomatoes, loaf of bread. The Lord provides. Yes, indeedy. The next day was Friday, and before noon, Heavy came to Ben's shack. Look here, he said. What's that little girl coming down here for? She wasn't here today, said Ben, and she won't be here tomorrow because she's going away with her parents, some place for the weekend. You better chase her home next time, said Heavy. We don't want her coming around here. Well, said Ben doubtfully. See, said Heavy, she lives right up there on the bluff, explained Ben. I know it, and she's got to stay there, see? Yes, said Ben. She's coming down Monday, though, after school. How do you know? She said so, explained Ben. What do you want to do, ruin this place? Asked Heavy. Little girls running around loose. Jesus. Well, said Ben. Nix on the kid stuff, declared Heavy. Understand? Ben walked into his shack and came out almost immediately. Have a can of corn, he said to Heavy. Heavy took it and looked at the label. He threw a glance up toward the arroyo top, and then looked at the can of corn again. He handled it as if it might be a high explosive. Huh, he grunted. Ben sighed. Heavy frowned and turned the can of corn over in his large dirty hands. "What else you got?" "Monday," said Ben. "Well, I'll be damned," said Heavy. He gave it a little more thought. The frown on his face slowly relaxed to a grin. "Watch your step, that's all. Little girls is dynamite." Then he walked north through the chaparral to his own shack, carrying the can of corn with him.